When we mention a safe environment, what comes to your mind? Welcome to another exciting edition of Environment Weekly on Global Television. My name is Ubong Usoro, your host. And today on the program, we'll be looking at how communication plays a vital role in passing the message about environment. Is it climate change? Is it global warming? What can we do to have a safe environment and the place of communication in all of this? That's what we want to look at on today's edition of the show. But before we get to look at that, let's look at a rundown of some environment news that we're able to track for you in the week gone. We'll be right back after this.
The Global Initiative for Food Security and Ecosystem Preservation, GISEP, with support from Oxfam and Nigeria, has joined the global Draw the Line campaign calling for urgent actions against climate injustice. The groups organized a solidarity march in Abuja at the weekend in support of the Environmental, Social, Health and Impact Assessment (EHSIA) bill aimed at protecting communities and environment. Speaking at the event, GISEP Executive Director Dr. Mike Gerunwa David called for increased adaptation finance to protect vulnerable communities alongside debt cancellation for climate purposes.
To channel resources towards resilience and sustainability. That the National Assembly to expedite action on the Environmental, Social and Health Impact Assessment Bill.
They stressed the need to stop the use of public funds to support industries fueling floods, heat waves, hunger, and poverty. The country director of Oxfam in Nigeria, represented by Dr. Kenneth Akpan, also threw the organization's words against the passage of the bill, ESHIA bill, describing it as a people-centered law that prioritizes communities and the environment.
We are backing this campaign to also lend our voice to end poverty, to end injustice when it comes to climate, and also even highlight gender justice.
He urged state governments and local governments to develop climate policies to safeguard vulnerable populations. Speakers, including youth representatives and women farmers, stressed the importance of giving young people a seat at the decision-making table, providing farmers with government support to adapt to new climate realities. The ESHIA bill seeks to replace the outdated Environmental Impact Assessment Act of 2004 and strengthens Nigeria's response to climate change. Ubong Osoro for Global Television. The Global Initiative for Food Security, in a celebration of climate reporting, Nigeria's journalists have been recognized for their steadfast commitment to highlighting environmental issues across the country. The awards, known as Climate Media Spotlight Awards, were recently held in Abuja and organized by the Global Initiative for Food Security and Ecosystem Preservation, GISEP, in partnership with Oxfam. The Climate Media Spotlight Awards aim to promote solution-oriented reporting on climate change, encouraging journalists to not only highlight challenges but also spotlight actionable solutions. Among the winners, Charles Monday Alpha emerged as the prize winner, taking home 500,000 naira. The first runner-up, Michael Semeri, received 300,000 naira, while Abdul Karim Majid, the second runner-up, was awarded 200,000 naira.
For many of you, feel that the social media is for the young people. No, take advantage of it and tell your story so that by next year you should be receiving a global award and not the local one here. But let's start from here.
The executive director of GISEP said the award is in recognition of the crucial role journalists play in raising awareness about climate change, inspiring others to continue producing stories that can drive policy change and community action. Also, the country director of Oxfam in Nigeria, John McKinney, said initiatives like the Climate Media Spotlight Awards aim to empower journalists to focus on solution-driven reporting. Their work is critical to shaping public opinion and informing climate actions in Nigeria.
Oxfam is a global international organization that works with the different partners wherever it's delivering its programs. So in Nigeria in particular, on issues around climate change, we are looking at a number of issues. First of all, it's the whole issue around awareness raising and looking at the issues around impact and how climate change is affecting different communities. So we would actually use that as to disseminate information and bring that awareness to the different communities that we're working in.
The event also served as a platform to strengthen collaboration among journalists, climate advocates, policymakers, ensuring that environmental reporting remains at the forefront of national conversation. Ubong Usora for Global Television.
Jane Goodall, the famed primatologist, anthropologist, and conversationist, has died, according to the institute she founded. She was 91 years old. Goodall died of natural causes while in California on a speaking tour of the United States, the institute said in a statement on social media on Wednesday, October 1st, 2025. The federal government on Tuesday, September 30th, 2025, launched the European Investment Bank-assisted Nigerian Climate Adaptation, Erosion and Waters Project. The project is designed to support the country in erosion control, flood management and water restoration. The Nigerian Customs Service Federal Operations Unit Zone B, Kaduna, has handed over a massive seizure of donkey bones and skin worth over 3.94 billion naira to the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, NESRA. The handover ceremony took place on Tuesday, September 30th, 2025 in Kaduna, where the Customs Area Controller, Aminu Sule, formally presented the confiscated items to the NESRA State Coordinator, Mr. Emmanuel Hene.
All right, welcome back. And today on the show, we want to be looking at climate dialogue, communication and its role in shaping climate preparedness and response. And who else would have been a better guest suited to help us discuss this? We have in the studio Greg Odogu, who is a writer, who is an environmentalist, who's done a lot of work around training people. In fact, I got to know him in one of the trainings I attended, and he was a trainer. He's actually training us on storytelling, on how to communicate climate change very well. So he's done a lot of work in that aspect, and we're happy to have you in our studio.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you, viewers.
All right. Let's start this way. What is climate communication and why does it matter? Especially in a time where we saw the US president some days ago, say climate change is not real. And people are guessing if it comes from an authority like that, somebody who is the president of the richest nation in the world and probably the most exposed nation in the world, should know better. Do we have a chance in Nigeria to even talk about these things, even when we see the impact in Nigeria? So I like that you lead us into what climate communication and what climate dialogue is.
Well, thank you for that question. First of all, we have to understand communication to understand climate communication, and it's easy to understand what communication is. Communication, you have to have a source, the person that is passing the message, then have a channel, then they have the audience. Then, when you now say climate communication, it means that what information you're passing from the source to the channel to audience contains information about climate change. So it becomes climate communication. So when you're passing the information about climate change, it is climate communication. And you refer to President Donald Trump, right? Because he said climate change was a scam or a con that was played on the world and specifically on America. Well, we know his stand. He has been like that even in his first term. He has been against climate change. In fact, he pulled out America from the climate agreement that the country entered into in Paris, France, with all the other members of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. He decided to pull America out of it and decided not to go green again. So this second time, he's trying to reinstate or reinforce what he believed. And I don't blame him for that, but we already knew and we were prepared. The whole green world, or let's say the climate conscious population of the world, were actually prepared. And let it be on record that Donald Trump is wrong, actually. He's turning science on its head. In fact, most of the things he said during that United Nations General Assembly has been fact-checked and found out to be false. He said that renewable energy did not have enough capacity to fuel this civilization or to power the present technology of the present society, the technology of the present society. And his fact check has shown that he was wrong, actually. And he said that the climate risks were not real, that it was in our head. And fact check has also shown that is fake. It's him that is giving us the fake information. Because, for instance, if you know that the first sign of climate change is ocean rise and the glaciers melting, especially in the places that you have permanent frozen water in Alaska, in the Greenland, in the cold part of the world where you have glaciers and you have ice peaks. So they are melting because the world is warming. So you see them melting and you see it. It's not in your head. You see it. It's scientific. You can measure the height, the height of the water. You can measure it with your tape. You can measure it with your ruler. And you see that it's increasing in the meters. And the world is afraid that we should not allow the temperature to rise above 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's what the world is looking at now. But Trump is not helping matters. But everybody is going right. We are going the right direction. We are not waiting for him. For instance, China has already said they are cutting down emissions and they have given their commitments. Nigeria being the biggest nation in Africa. In fact, we appeared on the front page of United Nations the United Nations website as one of the countries that have made commitments.
Because of our indices.
Of course.
National determined.
Our nationally determined contributions, we are making commitments that we are going to be cutting down emissions. So we have a project, we have a development strategy called Long-Term Low Emissions Development Strategy 2023 for Nigeria. We are going towards net zero by 2060 to 65, because we are following what the world wants, and the world does not want to be submerged.
Right. So just to bring make some arguments for Donald Trump. He mentioned the fact that in the 80s they talked about global cooling, right? That the world was going to cool, and there was a lot of talks about global cooling. And in the 90s, early 2000s, they started talking about global warming, right? And later, 2005 or thereabout, they now needed to put all of them in a family. They now said climate change. And he talked about it from the perspective of different persons, because we have a lot of even professors who are climate denials. And the major in that, you go on social media, you see them every day.
Of course.
They keep pushing out this information. And people have talked about the fact that maybe they are sponsored by corporations who, have to do with energy-based corporation that make millions of dollars out of that. But let's look at Nigeria. The whole of Africa emits just 4% of global emission, just 4%. And you have South Africa. If you take South Africa and maybe Rwanda out of the equation, we may just have just 1% for the whole of Africa. So does it really make sense that Africa is going into all of this? And as a climate communicator, I'm going to ask two questions. One, do we really understand the impact of climate change in Africa? And number two, is it right that we make commissions for things that it seems are contributing little or nothing?
Well, first of all, this brings me to the importance of this discussion. We're talking about communication. Climate change is not just an environmental challenge. It is also a communication challenge. Because the way and manner you communicate the information, the climate risks, the adaptation and the response to climate risks, and the way they are understood goes a long way to determine how institutions, organizations, and wider communities, they are going to take actions to respond to the risks. So if the communications is wrong, it's not going to help people to respond. I'm saying this because sometimes The communication gap is what is making us to miss the whole picture. The first thing the world has decided is that we all are going to have differentiated responsibilities. Their responsibility will not be as my own responsibility. That's why we have nationally determined contributions to carbon emissions, to lowering carbon emissions, because they know that there are people that are rich, there are people that are poor, and it's these rich nations, just like what you have pointed out, you have already pointed it out, that we contribute less than 4%. Now, everybody knows it's the developed world. They were the people that had the machines, the industries during the Industrial Revolution. So they were the people that emitted, and their carbons caused this warming. So in the UNFCCC process, the world have what is called differentiated responsibilities. So the responsibility of the Western world is not our responsibility. That is why in that NDC, our own is always smaller. Our own contribution is smaller. Then we are also going to be receiving funds from the developed world to help us to fight climate change. So it was decided in the last COP, the whole there is something called Green Climate Fund, GCF. So by 2030,
it's very difficult to access, right?
Yes, because there are some parameters, there are some requirements. You have to have capacity, you have to have what is called bankability kits. There are some processes that you have to, and it's not rocket science. You can just train your officers, train your government institutions to be able to pull this fund. And some people are pulling it. Some nations are really pulling it. That's why the developing world is always encouraged to have that. It's also about communication. Because if you communicate it right, the people will be prepared, because communication is not just about sending the message, it's about getting feedback. So you have to engage in capacity building for your officers, for the communities. So because it's communities that will support, if not they not innovate the green technology that will attract this fund. For instance, it's the community that will say, all our waste, we are going to be pushing them together so that we'll use it to generate energy. And it's that process of using waste to generate energy that will get you the carbon fund. So if they understand this, if they have that capacity, they will be able to achieve that carbon fund. Money is not thrown at people. There has to be a name for a project for you to attract funding. So, and the world is saying, the developing world, where we belong, we are not saying that we need up to $1 trillion. That 300 billion that they are talking about in the last is not even enough. So that's what should we be pushing. That $1 trillion should be doled out to us. So we'll be able to adapt to climate change and also contribute to mitigating climate change. So there are opportunities. It will create jobs. It will improve livelihoods. It will even increase our agricultural output. So I see the opportunities. I don't see the challenges.
Right.
Because if you see the opportunities, it will be easy for you to stop the blame game and then hit the ground running, because the world is not waiting for anybody.
Right. So we'll talk about climate preparedness and response now. How prepared are we? For instance, we want to have systems where we could have announcements or have alerts as to rainfall, flooding, climate alerts. How prepared are we as a nation, and what is the response times it takes for us to respond to climate caused activities, like maybe there's a wildfire, there's a flooding? How quickly are we able to respond? So preparedness on one side, are we prepared, and what role communication plays, and what role communication also plays in response?
Communication is very critical, and that's why, coming back to your question, Nigeria is doing its best. I know it's a political statement saying doing its best. There are two institutions in Nigeria. One is the National Meteorological Agency. They coordinate the activities around meteorology, and meteorology is about weather and climate. So the extreme rainfalls is part of meteorology. The flooding is part of it. There's another agency, NISA, Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, NISA. they do what is called annual flood outlook, AFO, where they will now say, we have made measurements scientifically. We have tested the texture, the water, and some other indices, and we found out that this is what the flood could be in this year. This is a flood outlook. These are the local governments, these are the states where the flood is going to impact, because we are lucky actually, we have just a few climate risks in Nigeria, and the major one is flooding. And this is about 60% man-made, because it's about infrastructure. For instance, if we had a dam in northeast, near our border with Cameroon, it would have been able to contain the heavy, floodgates, or the heavy flood that is coming from Cameroon through the Lado Dam, which means it's man-made. Because if there were dams, it wouldn't have been as bad as it were in 2012, in 2022. So the agencies, NIMET and NISA, they give annual, what is called, NIMET is called Seasonal Climate SCP, Seasonal Climate Prediction, SCP. So in every year, they start between so it's supposed to communicate the year's forecast to farmers, basically, and other people, other stakeholders that use this information, that depend on this information to know how to prepare for the climate extreme events for the year, because climate change has caused some extreme events, like rainfall and so on and so forth, droughts, what we call spell, dry spell. It's not really drought, it's dry spell, because the rain doesn't come for some time, so it's not really drought. Drought is for years, so it's for dry spell. So they prepare you for the dry spell, prepare you for the heavy rain, and they even look at some indices for maybe some diseases that could break out. For instance, malaria through when we become heat, the warmth, it helps the malaria parasites to breed, vectors to breed. So they give this information. So the good thing is this: that information is available in Hausa, Igbo, Broken, English, that Pidgin. The major Nigerian languages, Yoruba, I've seen them, I have them. Every year they dish it out from. They even have people that go to these farmers and speak to them, talk to them. I know they may not have covered the whole country, but I see this Nigeria effort from these institutions as part of the effort for preparedness. They prepare people. Now, coming to the second leg of your question, the response. That's where the problem is, because we have institutional problem here. We don't have the manpower or the capacity or the political will to respond adequately. So I think there is a problem here, because if it's in the Western world, you pick a call when there is a fire, is by seconds. Even if somebody has fallen into a well, and you make a call to the government, to the emergency line, the response will be almost immediate. But here, even last week, we saw sadly about a journalist, a broadcast journalist died because it was about response. Yes, because the police couldn't respond, right? Because they are part of the first responders. They couldn't respond, so the person died before the hospital, even the hospital didn't respond. So we have a problem in response. So it's also in the climate sector. When there is flooding, people die before government will now come and bring trusses and all that, So the response is also institutional. The laxity in the response infrastructure is not as it should be, and that's where the government should do a lot. First of all, it should also strengthen the preparedness, bring more journalists, more communication experts in social media and so on and so forth. Tell us on apps to divest this information, sector specific and also location specific. People that are living in floodplains, they should have something that speaks to their situation, speaks to their frailty, vulnerabilities. So let them understand. So if the government should put more efforts to make this more virile, to make it more to robust preparedness, and then start a total overhaul Nigeria's response infrastructure. It's very important. Have a dedicated line for climate emergencies. If you have a flood, call this line. The one that happened in Mokwa last year, people woke up and said the flood was. The first people that woke up would have made some call to, just like you call when you see a criminal, when it's a armed robbers act. If somebody see, police always release some phone lines. Say if you see a crime, you should call some numbers. The same way, climate emergency should have dedicated lines. If you notice that the river is rising, this is number to call. If you notice that there is a fire in your farm, this is number to call. Because even in some villages, I am aware, even in my village, because of the dry spell, there is a trigger because there is so much dryness. Any small fire will ignite. So let the phone lines be there for people to call when they see these early warning symptoms. There is something called early warning systems. So that early warning systems speak to these signs. When the people call in concerning this early warning signs, the early warning systems are activated. So it's something that is deliberate, it's something that costs money, and it's something that costs the government time and costs them workforce to install. But this system is very important. The early warning system helps response.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just like a there are two sides of a coin, actually. We have to.
Unfortunately, we are out of time and we have to go. But before we go, I'd like to ask the last question. How do we target misinformation?
When you say misinformation, I can, unless maybe I have to ask you to explain further. Okay. Wow. It's just, if you bring the right information, misinformation will go naturally, because the right information we cancel misinformation, because science speaks for itself. When you tell somebody this is white and you show him the white, don't just tell him, show him. You have informed the person adequately with scientific evidence. And when the misinformation comes, the first says, oh, I've seen the rating, and it will be able to cancel the misinformation and help the person to adapt, because climate change is, the major thing about climate change is adaptation. The people that were there when Noah was warning them that the rain were going to fall, when the rain fell, they started saying, some of them, I know I was not there, but some of them will be saying, he didn't communicate to us well. We didn't understand what he was saying, because if they understood, they would have taken the right action.
And maybe that was climate change. Thank you.
Of course, it's the same science.
Who is a journalist and a climate communicator. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
That's the size of our program for today. Keep staying with us. The same time, same station, we return with another exciting edition. Like we say, we must do our part to make sure that we have an environment that is safe for all. My name is Ubong Usoro. I'm saying bye for now.